to the wax for my conscience. Brian James in LA, you're on college. I've been jumping on them planes like a hobby. Still moving with the pack like my partners. Hit the John on them jets cause we wildin'. But the bowl is a party on the island. Moment of silence. So good, get back to the topic. Grew up, it was me and Flocka. Grandma's and Big T, this my mama. I ain't even for the pain when my pots flip. Knew his name, that's it, never bothered. Mom said, you the man, son, you got this. Ever since I found a way to go and pop shit. Hold up, blaze through a whole zip. Took a seat at the table of my first flip. Days in red roof for my first whip. Spent the money with the gang, never post pics. Seen a change in the game, had to coach it. Never let them take my wangs in the mold, bitch. Ever made in a month, nigga. Used to serve him at the minute just to front, nigga. Goddamn. Had to grow up quick, I made my own rules. Had my first child, got it jumping with music. Can't really hang with nobody who losing. I thought by now that you would go and get it, but I could hardly see niggas as distant. Know you get cropped if you not in the picture. And I made that tag and went got a bag. Shots to the Henny and OG prescriptions, put rebel shit on the map. Took a leap from where I started at. Started ballin' now on Chris Paul and Cats. Got him steady calling for the mold, but I'm on a roll, gotta call him back. And that's all fact.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard. Welcome aboard. All carry-on items should now be stowed securely, either in an overhead bin or under the seat in front of you. All aisles, exits, and bulkhead areas should now be clear. All electronic devices should now be turned off and stowed, as they may interfere with the aircraft's navigational and communication systems. Once airborne, we'll let you know when you may use approved electronic devices, but note that some items may not be used at any time during the flight. You'll find a list of approved devices in the in-flight information section.
All right, welcome everybody to another edition of the Pocket Locker Podcast. I'm your host with the most, all the way from the East Coast, and as always, good people, I am in airplane mode. All right, listen, we don't got time to waste. Let's get into it. Gang, the liberal Christian nationalism is going to get us all killed. And I don't know. I heard this, what I want to call an analysis that doesn't analyze earlier. And, I was hoping I could maybe break this down for y'all, see if y'all picking up what I'm putting down as far as why this type of analysis is part of the problem. But yeah, we're doomed. So let's go ahead and get into it. We unfortunately live in the most serious of times.
Is James Talarico a liberal Christian nationalist? Since he won his victory over Jasmine Crockett, there have been people on the left and on the right who've claimed that Talarico's faith makes him nothing more than a Christian nationalist on the left, just as bad as those on the right. Today, I want to talk about if that's true, if it holds up, and what it means. Welcome to Straight White American Jesus. I'm Brad Onishi, author of American Caesar, How Theocrats and Tech Lords Are Turning America into a Monarchy, founder of Access Mundi Media, co-host of this show. A couple of weeks ago, James Talarico won his primary victory over Jasmine Crockett. He is now the Democratic candidate for Senate in Texas.
They're scared of the movement we are building. They're going to throw everything they have at us. They're going to call me a radical leftist. They're going to call me a fake Christian. They'll call our movement un-Texan, un-American. They'll call us a threat. The only truth is, we are a threat. We're a threat to their corrupt system.
And since his
I think just these people, I just think the way that, like, when people get caught up in the electoral spirit, the way they just be feeling like they finna do the most. Man, I ain't doing
victory, there have been people who have come out to say that Talarico, who talks about his faith all the time, who rose to fame and prominence on TikTok and Instagram because of the way that he was able to level his critics and his political opponents using theological language.
Now, boom, let's stop right there, okay? It's like literally announcing his victory, citing He won because of the way he can use that theological language. He won the way that he could push back, he could resist his critics, he could resist his opponents using that sweet, sweet Christianese. Okay. So the man had his Christianese church game on point. Now he displaces Jasmine Crockett, one of the only elected officials who actually is willing to speak truth to power in this country, who, as far as I know, is a Christian her damn self. Like what are we talking about here? All right. All right, so that's the framing. So y'all should already know what the problem is. Y'all should already see the problem coming. Oh my goodness.
Well, that he's nothing more than a Christian nationalist on the left. Is that true? Let's find out.
Yes. All right. Roll the credits. We out of here, y'all.
Ready for takeoff?
I mean, it's kind of that simple, but unfortunately, not with these libs. Not with these libs. We're gonna act like this is real complicated.
Christian nationalism is on the rise. 3 years ago, Christian nationalists stormed the U.S. Capitol, killing police officers while carrying crosses and signs reading "Jesus saves." 2 years ago, Christian nationalists on the U.S. Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, allowing states like ours to outlaw abortion even in cases of rape and incest in the name of Christ. And it is a betrayal of Jesus of Nazareth. Not just our Christian neighbors, not just our straight neighbors, not just our male neighbors, not just our white neighbors, not just our rich neighbors. We are called to love all of our neighbors.
And again, like this is something like, but this is a great clip for it. So it's good to just pause here because he just did it. This is what we're talking about. Like, to me, he absolutely a liberal Christian nationalist. And absolutely, right now, liberal Christian nationalism, absolutely the problem. Absolutely the problem. The same way, you know, when you do the correct analysis, Dr. King himself, somebody who I think if he were really for real trying to get down right now, would not be moving the same way he was as a minister. That's just my best guesswork. But in any case, he certainly was calling out the white moderates, the white liberals, and recognizing how the church itself, especially a lot of the sort of the liberal intelligentsia ecumenical side, was trying to really, in a sense, pump the brakes on liberation, basically saying that they approved of his message and his mission, but not his methods and his urgency and taking on too much too fast. And we live in I would argue similarly or comparably serious and dangerous times, not only here at home, but on the world stage. And yes, we have the same thing. And part of the manifestation of the liberal Christian nationalism on the left is this inability to separate church and state. And it reflects two things. It reflects a Christian nationalist agenda. It reflects a way in which you are trying to legitimize your claim to power, literally vote for me so that I can become one of the most powerful lawmakers in this country. You are trying to root it and ground it in your Christian identity. There's just no doubt about it. You're explicitly doing that. The second thing is you are betraying a profound distrust of the American public to be able to evaluate your fitness for candidacy in the absence of grounding your leadership and public role in your Christian identity and Christian rhetoric. And it shows that like you don't trust the electorate to be adults, to speak to the values that we hold in common as society. So it betrays the fact that the liberal Christian nationalists actually don't believe in the same alleged democratic, shared vision of, we all have equal footing. Because you don't even think you can handle public business. You don't even think you can reflect, oh, I could call out January 6th. I can call out Christian nationalism. I can call out all the problems that are happening and just talk about how they're undermining democracy, how they're, illegal, how they're, not a reflection of our national character, not a reflection of the type of society that we want to live in as Americans. But y'all can't do that. You have to literally make everything about Jesus, knowing good and goddamn well there's supposed to be a separation of church and state. Knowing good and goddamn well you profess to uphold that separation of church and state. And again, you're literally calling out the way that your political opponents fail to do so, the way they keep trying to legislate biblical authority, but you're just trying to be a counter biblical legislator. All right, so that's the fucking problem. And it should be fucking clear from clips like this exactly what the problem is. And I'm gonna roll it back real quick so y'all can hear it one more time now that I've laid that out, hear it again in that context. And then we should be able to move on with, again, a clear acknowledgement of what we're saying the problem with this type of thing is.
And that is Roe v. Wade.
My finger back on the button here. All right, here we go.
Is that true?
Christian nationalism is on the rise. 3 years ago, Christian nationalists stormed the U.S. Capitol, killing police officers while carrying crosses and signs reading "Jesus saves." 2 years ago, Christian nationalists on the U.S. Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, allowing states like ours to outlaw abortion even in cases of rape and incest in the name of Christ. And it is a betrayal of Jesus of Nazareth.
A betrayal of Jesus of Nazareth. Before he says anything else. Before he says a word about the law, the Constitution, the flag, the Capitol, the elected officials, the civic order, none of that shit, y'all. None of that shit. It was a betrayal of Jesus fucking Christ, first and foremost.
Our Christian neighbors, not just our straight neighbors, not just our male neighbors, not just our white neighbors, not just our rich neighbors. We are called to love all of our neighbors. And that is exactly the opposite of what Christian nationalism does in the world.
And then again, not giving me civic responsibility, social order, national harmony, we're all Americans, love your just love your neighbor like on some civic shit. No, it's we are called. We are called by who, nigga? We supposed to be talking about what you're supposed to be called to based on the Constitution and the laws of the United States of America and the Constitution and the laws of the state of Texas. And you don't even think, with some of the greatest tragedies that have happened in American history, like January 6th, that we can't have a grown-ass conversation where you speak to what the problem of January 6th was without invoking your religion or how it was a failure from your religious perspective. That is the embodiment and epitome of liberal Christian nationalism.
Talarico has served in the Texas House of Representatives since 2018. He rose to prominence through videos where he takes down his fellow Texas legislators about the Ten Commandments bills, about the idea of allowing chaplains with no training, no master's degree, no vetting to act as de facto school counselors, and even a conspiracy-laden bid to pass a bill to ban furries from school campuses. Now, Talarico is an avowed Christian who is also a champion of the separation of church and state.
That's another thing too, because I think he mentions this whole like narrow thing, and it's this thing where people project onto the Christian right, the alt-right Christian nationalists, that they are these extremists promoting a narrow vision of Christianity, as though their vision of Christianity is somehow less Christian and also less true than the Christianity of the left, who are presumed to be the good ones and the honest ones, the more sincere, genuine Christians, when in reality, the whole goddamn thing's bullshit. And we can't call out the fact that it's bullshit because those same quote unquote liberal Christians who don't want to privilege Christian identity and believe we should all hold hands and sing harmoniously and be Americans, and they're liberal and they believe in everybody's freedom and everybody's right. They literally won't participate in the motherfucking democratic process. You literally can't even count on them to show up to motherfucking vote. Forget the fucking revolution that we need. Forget the fucking upheaval and the fucking burning down to the fucking ground of the entire fucking structure that the moment fucking requires of us right now. Fuck all of that. These motherfuckers won't even show up to vote unless you find somebody that can appeal to their Christianity, unless you find a fucking a fucking white acceptable fucking youth pastor looking motherfucker, other people's analysis, not mine, that can literally throw the Christianese out there so that before he speaks the United States Constitution or the laws or the democratic processes related to the state of Texas, he speaks Christianese. Then we have to celebrate the fact that he might give us a key seat. He might shift the balance of power just in the right direction. Never mind the fact that it comes at the sacrifice of Jasmine Crockett, again, one of the only elected officials we have willing to speak truth to power. Never mind the fact that she would have moved us further in the correct direction. Never mind the fact that she always manages to do that without bathing herself in a cross. Again, I think she's probably a Christian and she has her own fucking issues as a candidate. But notice she can show up and do the motherfucking job without having to turn everything into a goddamn sermon. Now this motherfucking Talarico comes along and wants to talk about Jesus just as much as the motherfuckers on the Republican MAGA motherfuckers want to do. And now all of a sudden it's a problem. People want to call it out.
Talarico is a former public middle school teacher who now balances his duties in the Texas legislature with his studies at Austin Presbyterian Theological Seminary. He talks about his faith so often and with such rhetorical brilliance.
So yeah, PC, like my thing is the left wants to equally portray a narrow, fictitious view of Christianity. It's just the narrow vision of Christianity where Christianity is never the problem. God is love. God is the reason there's harmony. Christianity is certainly not to blame for the theocratic nightmare that was the settling of America and the crimes against humanity that entailed. Christianity has nothing to do with slavery. Christianity has nothing to do with Jim Crow or segregation or the legacy of racism. Christianity has nothing to do with us not having an equal rights amendment or continuing to oppress and control women's body. Christianity has nothing to do with the anti-immigration and hostility towards immigrants and black and brown people that has contributed to our tax dollars being used to bomb girls' schools in Iran as we speak, while they tell us we don't have enough money for books or universal health care. See, that narrow portrayal of fucking Christianity does fucking nothing for us. It does jack shit. It is a national fucking fairy tale. It is a goddamn delusion. And we're sick of it. And we're trying to tell you the thing that we need in this moment is to stop playing this goddamn Christianity game, period. End of story. Now is not the motherfucking time. But this is the reason we will fail to meet this moment, because as the Christian right is telling us, Donald Trump has been anointed to bring about Armageddon. The Christian left is telling us, well, it's not that I don't believe in Armageddon or the biblical account. It's just that my scripture says gay people are good to go and no man should know the day or the hour. Bible war to my right, Bible war to my left. Get ready for the draft.
That it is impossible to ignore this foundational aspect of his political identity. He is the rare Democrat who has branded himself successfully as a Christian politician. Whereas Pete Buttigieg, Raphael Warnock, Joe Biden, and many others discuss their faith openly, their opponents, and most of the media, focus on other aspects of their public persona to attack. Biden was supposedly the president of open borders. Warnock, like many black leaders, is denigrated by the white as, quote, woke and anti-American. Buttigieg is gay.
Again, Joe Biden, the most Catholic president we've ever had. Everybody skipped right over that shit. Nobody gave a fuck. Joe Biden might as well have been a goddamn fucking devil worshiping for real, hardcore, like literal, like the type of Satanists that actually do believe in fucking Satan and worship his ass. Not the real Satan, not most Satanists, but y'all know what I'm talking about. And Reverend Raphael Warnock, well, he's black, so he ain't really a Christian. Pete Buttigieg, he can't be a fucking Christian just off rip, he's gay, right? That's this dude's fucking analysis. And then literally wants to turn around and crown fucking Talarico the king of the game because he successfully branded himself a Christian politician, but on the left. But the motherfucker's here to tell us why somehow this doesn't count as liberal Christian nationalism.
Which is enough in itself for much of MAGA to discount anything he does or says. It's not that Talarico's religion makes him different. He is not the only Democrat who is a Christian. He's not the only liberal or progressive politician who's taken on the mantle of faith. That's just simply not true. But Talarico has been able to break through something that has been a kind of faith ceiling for Democrats.
A faith ceiling.
This boyish millennial who looks like the second coming of Jimmy Carter and talks like the son of Mr. Rogers uses Christian theology so
he broke through the ceiling because they can't do the job without him. They cannot listen to the argument. They cannot sufficiently motivate the electorate. Read between the next line. They certainly cannot sufficiently motivate the electorate enough to rebuff the Christian nationalism of the right without the ability to sufficiently motivate their base based in speaking to their faith. And then what comes that is the threat. If you want nice things, if you want human rights, if you want the big bad wolf to not be in power anymore, you gotta open up space for us. You have to make sure the left doesn't get pushed too far towards secular values. Make sure the left doesn't get too woke, because so you gotta hold space for all these Christians. And when you start holding space for all these Christians, all of a sudden they're gonna be like, why so much talk about pronouns? Nigga, nobody even said anything about pronouns. You just showed up and on day one, we just said, hi, nice to meet you. And you're like, why are we talking so much about trans people? We're like, are there any trans people here? I don't even know if there are any trans people here. Nobody said anything, right? Like that's the shit. Like, and that's how y'all do us. So, and what do people want in this moment? What do Americans want in this moment, y'all? Where literally the right is literally telling us Donald Trump was anointed to nuke Iran so that it could light the signal fire for the motherfucking return of the king. And are Americans ready to fucking say, all right, that's okay. Okay, that Epstein ass motherfucker is God's anointed. Okay, you know what? This whole Christian thing has gone way too far. It's time for us to reevaluate. Listen, we know Jesus means so much to y'all. We know this country's a fucking cult. We know you're goddamn children. We know your brains are broken and you're incapable of answering any serious question with anything other than the same one syllable, 3-letter word, God, 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 God. But you can't prove the shit. And this shit right here is called a goddamn democracy. So everybody's got to be okay here. So we just need you to keep the Christian shit in your goddamn private life and in your goddamn private churches. Okay? When you come out here into the shared space of grown folk society where all of us have to fucking live together, keep that shit out of here and just be a goddamn adult. You keep saying God is the reason you love your neighbors and you're just the most loving people and you're just the most wonderful. Well, then shut the fuck up about your goddamn faith and just show us the neighbor part. Just show us that you are capable of showing up and being this wonderful fucking neighbor that Jesus allegedly is making you without us having to fucking worship your Bible and play fucking worship tunes over the PA system to motivate your ass to get up and go to the goddamn polls so that the rest of us can have human rights. But since you can't do that, we're literally just going to keep dropping more bombs on the Middle East. And then when y'all come over here, what are we actually getting? Are you actually going to step things forward? Are you actually going to change society? Are you really down here to take down the patriarchy, the capitalism, and the white supremacy that have been oppressing the rest of us? Or are you just going to give us back to the motherfucking status quo that didn't work for anybody else but you to begin with the status quo of structures that were meant to validate people like you, white American Christian, but not like us, anybody the fuck else? So then we just return back to that status quo, and now you can go back and be comfortable with your posh style, where the rest of us just get you've turned down the hell from 15, where it was so hot it was actually bothering you, back down to 12, where it only fucks up the lives of the rest of us. And then do we get a more equal society where the rest of us have more representation, where the rest of us have more say, where the rest of us are allowed to design a society that truly works for all of us? No, we get Christo-fascism as the only path to power on the right, and we get the same Christo-fascism as the only path to power on the left. That's the fucking problem.
Effectively against his opponents that neither the American right nor the media can ignore his religion. Talarico is, quote, not the only Christian Democrat in the country, but he's the one who maybe most effectively tells a story about why he believes what he believes, says Luke Warford, a Democratic strategist. He's unlike anyone else in the Democratic Party. And I think that resonates at a time when people are hungry for different. Let me put it simply. James Talarico's brand is Christianity. That has not been true for a high-profile Democrat in decades. Now, if Christianity is his brand, then the brand's motto is simple.
There is nothing Christian about Christian nationalism.
Part of what makes Talarico...
And again, listen, he says it. Listen, he says it. The same way nobody who has ever talked about the problems of sexism has turned out to be a motherfucking misogynist pig. The same way nobody who has ever talked about anti-LGBTQ bigotry has turned out to be a motherfucking transphobe. The same way nobody who has ever talked about Black Lives Matter and the problem of racism have turned out, in fact, to be motherfucking tools of the goddamn white supremacist social order. Oh, he said Christian nationalism is bad. He can't be a Christian nationalism. My work here is done. And this is why we're so fucked. It's not just how fucked we are already. It's that the people who, should be helping us get unfucked, aka the motherfuckers people listen to, so they can, try to get some sort of analysis, trying to get some sort of understanding about what the fuck is going on in the world. This is what passes for the goddamn intelligentsia. This is what passes for the critical analysis of the situation. These goddamn liberal ass fucking white boys sitting in a goddamn room with literally no ability to critique goddamn anything, no goddamn structural analysis, being like, well, I read that the goddamn academic definition of Christian nationalism is an ultra far right movement where you have to believe that there's only two sexes that are biologically male and female, and you have to be an anti-abortion, anti-LGBTQ, Zionist, racist, and if you're not that, then what are we talking about anymore? And it's like, bro, this is why we have no goddamn motion, because people like this get to pass as fucking leadership, and motherfuckers think they listen to some shit like this, and then they go, oh, well, I've done the difficult work, and I have decided that James Talarico is in fact not a Christian nationalist. He's one of the good ones. Definitely not a part of the problem in any way, shape, or form. Nothing to see here. Christianity is good to go. God bless America.
Rico, so alluring to people of faith and people of no faith is his stalwart belief that the separation of church and state is the only way for all Americans to be free, and for religious people to practice their religion apart from government interference or corruption. Freedom from religion is the only way to find freedom of religion. That's a long Baptist credo. It's one that finds its antecedents in the American founding. But it's
and then he like tells us, he like literally just gave us the liberal Christo-fascist fucking liberal Christian nationalism theology. He literally told us what his, according to him, the proper understanding of how actually real Christians believe freedom from religion is the only way to have freedom of religion, and it's right there. It is literally acting as though this liberal version of fucking Christianity somehow has something to fucking say about what the fuck it should mean to be a goddamn American in the year 2026. And here's the thing people are not willing to fucking recognize. Religion has made itself the target constantly by stepping into arenas it has no business being in. Then when you start to play the rules of the game based on the rules that are used of the game in that arena, it turns out Christianity had no business in that arena to fucking begin with. So here's the truth people don't want to fucking hear. Christianity's not goddamn fucking compatible with a motherfucking modern democracy, you dumb motherfuckers. You have a fundamentally anti-egalitarian, exclusive fucking worldview based on fucking coercion and punishment and might makes right, and my God is the author of fucking the goddamn universe, and you either believe like me or you fucking go to hell, and then y'all think it's all good to invite that fucking crowd to sit down at the goddamn grown-up table and tell us how we should run a fucking democracy in the year 2026. It's like I have to teach my students. The problem with creationism and evolution is not that scientists don't want you to have personal religious faith. Scientists don't give a fuck about your personal religious faith. The goddamn problem is that Bible tells people it has an explanation of the origin of species, including how the fuck humans came to inhabit this planet. It turns out nothing about that fucking fairy tale has anything to do with the actual natural history of this goddamn planet. So once we figured out the actual natural history of this motherfucking planet, according to the rules of how you do natural history, yeah, all of a sudden the church had a motherfucking problem on its hand. And now to this day, the most well-supported theory in the motherfucking history of scientific theories continues to be under attack to the point that literally threatens the career prospects of evolutionary biologists, because those motherfuckers hate the truth, which is that the way they view the world is totally incompatible with natural history. Who the fuck's problem is that? Yeah, and what the rest of the world is not willing to realize, because what I just said, most of y'all fucking agree with. Yeah, we all know this. We all know creationism sitting on some bullshit, and we know that fucking this fundamentalist type ass religion is not compatible with science. Yeah, here's the part you need to realize. It's not compatible with democracy either. It's not compatible with like a modern world where you want to create a public civil order where everybody has an equal say, where everybody has human rights, where everybody is free to participate in society equally. You can't have that when motherfuckers are free to run around and tell me if I don't believe and live like they do, that I'm going to burn in hell forever. And then they're also told to make disciples of the nations and convert the world. And apparently they've got to like set things up and get things in the right order for this Jesus character to come back. And so you can't stop them because it's part of their religion that says they have to be free to practice their religion, whatever their fucking religion requires them to do. And if their religion requires them to prepare ye the way of the Lord, then they've got to prepare ye the way of the Lord. And you've got a fucking now public responsibility to allow them to prepare ye the way of the Lord. So the rest of us are just subject to whatever the fuck they just happen to think prepare ye the way of the Lord fucking means. And I don't want to play that game. But now I'm stuck. Because if I go over here to my right, I got to prepare ye the way of the Lord. And when I go over here to the left, y'all just want to use a whole different route to also prepare ye the way of the Lord. I don't want to prepare ye the way of the Lord. God damn it, I hate this shit, y'all. God, I'm so tired of it. I'm so fucking sick of it. What the fuck is going on around here?
One that's largely been forgotten in the half a century of dominance by the religious right, the moral majority, and Christian nationalists. However, since his primary victory over Jasmine Crockett, critics from both the right and the left have pushed back on Talarico's disdain for Christian nationalism by claiming that he too is a Christian nationalist, just of a different stripe. Christian ethno-nationalist C.J. Engel, who wants to see the government deport 100 million people, posted this to X. Reminder that the left is also Christian nationalist and seeks to implement biblical standards into government without caring about the non-existent separation of church and state. But they are allowed to do this because their framework supports the interests of the regime. William Wolf is a Southern Baptist leader, and he's also one of the 15 leaders invited to the White House in March 2025 to meet and pray with President Trump. He's been obsessively posting about how Talarico is a heretic and blasphemer for weeks. March 9th. I've been expecting this. James Talarico is, quote, judgment day for the anti-Christian nationalist cottage industry. Every leftist academic, pundit, pastor, etc., who's been decrying the dangers of, quote, Christian nationalism is about to get outed as a total hypocrite and fraud as they line up to cheer for a man who's running a more, quote, Christian nationalist campaign than anyone in the country, just on progressive/woke so-called, quote, Christian values that aren't anywhere to be found in the Bible. Both Engel and Wolf are...
But he is right. He is right. This is the thing, like, People think that, like, see, this is I don't know what the fuck to call it. I'm gonna just call it some shit I'm about to make up, and that's gonna be called the boogeyman effect. People think there's this boogeyman effect where just because me and somebody are diametrically opposed, and what's going to happen when we hit the streets? When we hit the streets and they try to do their shit, and I hit the street and try to do my shit, our signals is definitely going to get crossed, and that shit's going to be explosive. Okay, that doesn't mean every single fucking sentence that comes out of their mouth is fucking wrong. If that motherfucker pulls up on me and is like, it is 5:41 p.m. East Coast time on March 19, 2026, I'm gonna be like, goddamn right it is. Right? That's just a fact. And when the motherfucker is like, yo, James Talarico just pulled the Christian nationalism, and watch these same motherfuckers that's been weeping and crying and begging and screaming about Christian nationalism, making fucking documentaries and shit. Watch these motherfuckers lose their fucking minds in celebration because one of the Christian nationalists is actually on the left. Yeah, that's a motherfucking very accurate analysis of what the fuck just happened. That's like watching a fucking football game being like, damn, that quarterback just threw a 70-yard pass to the motherfucking wide receiver and he caught it for a touchdown. And you're like, yeah, he did. Yeah, he did. That's what happened. Mm-hmm. Yep. I saw the same thing you saw. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Just because I punch a motherfucker like that in the face don't mean he's wrong about what his goddamn name is. He knows what the fuck is on his birth certificate, and he knows a goddamn Christian nationalist when he sees one. He's right. Yeah, so he's a far-right preacher who's going to be at Trump's prayer breakfast or whatever the fuck. Okay, yeah, but he's also right about James Talarico. What about that part?
Avowed Christian nationalists, who I argue in my forthcoming book, American Caesar, want to implement a narrow vision of Christian statehood in law, policy, culture, and economics, in order that the United States would be a white Christian nation. Engel claims that Jews have no real place in American society. Wolf argues that the Bible demands our leaders deport millions and millions of people so that real Americans can have their country back. In the wake of Nicole Good's murder, he said, I don't care how much they scream. I don't care how much they cry. I don't care how loud they protest. I don't care how much it costs. I just want my country back.
UC Love, that's that should drop you the link to the new spot where we hang out. Just bookmark it or whatever for laters.
Whatever it takes, no matter how much it costs.
We should not blink, we should not hesitate to tell people, not because we are so wise, not because we made the rules of the world, we didn't. We humbly submit to how God made the rules of the world, and we say, this is how we should order our lives together. And frankly, yes, we are going to impose it upon you. If you don't like it, I'm sorry, but this is good and right and just if it lines up with God's standards. And I am going to enforce my morality on you in as much as our morality is God's morality. And you should always check yourselves. This is how we're going to run our county. This is how we're going to run our state. And this is how we should run the United States of America, by legislating the morality that we can find in the Bible.
What strikes...
Okay. So just quickly, because I want y'all to hear how this all comes together. Because let's be clear about what pisses me off about this type of analysis. It's very sophomoric. It's very YouTube philosophy, bro, with no real weight to it. Why do I say that? Because what these motherfuckers do is they try to make it like, okay, I'm going to jump in to this big, weighty conversation that's happening, and I'm going to give you my very detailed and sophisticated breakdown. And you can see how he's setting it up. But what he's really doing is he's doing, again, a philosophy bro thing, which is, let's have an argument about definitions, right? Then my trump card is going to be, I'm going to go with the official definition, or I'm going to go with my preferred authoritative definition, okay? Boom. Now that I slap down my preferred authoritative definition, now all I have to do is show you that the case we're talking about does not meet my preferred authoritative definition, okay? And that's why these are two different conversations to begin with. Because if all you have to do is slap down your preferred authoritative definition, which is fundamentally, at its essence, Christian nationalism is this far-right movement that wants us to live according to biblical authority and says that America was founded as a Christian nation and explicitly says that the government should have Christian laws, right? Then we're done. Okay. But the truth is, the people who are making the critique to begin with, the people who are saying, hey, I think this is Christian nationalism just on the left, they're not saying he's doing the same thing as the people on the right. They never said, oh, James Talarico ran as a Christian on the left, and simply by essence, the fact that he ran for public office as a Christian on the left, who happens to also mention and be public about his faith, then he, by definition, is the same thing as a far-right Christian nationalist who wants America to officially be a Christian nation. And it's like, you're arguing against a fucking argument that was never made, right? And then you have to see like how dumb that is, because number one, yes, it first off, we're having two different conversations. Second of all, you just crowned yourself the winner of the goddamn argument by simply picking the definition you liked and then playing fucking word games about it. When how do words change? How do meanings emerge? They emerge through change, through dialogue, which means language is not fixed. Language is not flexible. So the purpose of somebody calling out the Christian nationalism on the left is to make a structural critique about how people on the left move with regard to Christianity, with regard to Christian identity, that actually moves the country in a direction where it's current structural upholding of Christianity continues to play out in ways that continue to keep Christians preferentially in positions of power and privilege, and continues to move the country towards a place where only Christians have legitimate rights to govern, and we're never able to really ever rectify the social consequences of continuing to normalize Christian identities, values, principles, and yes, civic ideas over the rest of us. We know they're not far-right Christian nationalists, dumbass. Nobody claimed that they were. But what we want to talk about is how what they're doing is not the fucking move. So actually, I appreciate the motherfucker calling it out. I appreciate him bringing attention, because again, what's the result of James Talarico is what they're trying. What the fuck is going to happen if he wins? Or what's going to happen if the lesson we learn is that we need more candidates like him? And what the fuck are you doing other than literally sitting here reinforcing the motherfucking narrative that we need more candidates like him? And then what the fuck else are you doing other than reinforcing the narrative that, again, we're not going to have nice things unless we celebrate more candidates like him? And we're not going to be able to get Christians to vote for the fucking protections and the civil order and the rights for the rest of us unless we get behind and celebrate candidates like him. And we're not going to be able to stop the baddies on the other side and the real Christo-fascists who want to keep dropping bombs on Iranian girl schools unless we celebrate and endorse more candidates like him. So what the result is that literally the left ends up coercively telling, particularly the actual left, the actual progressives, the actual leftists, and all the people who are actually trying to move us towards a more egalitarian, secularized society, which is what you have to do. Not just in some sort of like, oh, I'm an atheist and I don't like Christians. But no, if you are to move towards an actual democracy where everyone has equal rights and everyone can participate equally, and you don't have to pass a religious test for office, and you don't have to pass a religious test for access and proximity to power, then we by definition have to move towards a secular society that doesn't actually privilege any religions and reinforces more stridently the separation of church and state. Like for real, not just in terms of you can't legislate in a way where you're legislating based on religious dogma or religious doctrine, but actually says it's socially unacceptable to continue to tie your efforts to seek political power to your ethical and moral stance as a believer. It's inappropriate to keep telling us the reason you should be the leader is because of the way you lead from your faith. Fine, your faith is what made you a leader. Your faith is what makes you want to serve. Your faith is what makes you the greatest neighbor to ever neighbor. Fine, shut the fuck up about it and just be the greatest neighbor to ever neighbor. Just be the greatest public servant to ever publicly serve. Just get out here in the fucking streets and fight for our rights and resist the goddamn fascists. But what you're telling us is, number one, you can't do so. You literally, you apparently don't actually believe in the democratic principles enough to actually even be inspired and motivated by them. You're basically telling me the Constitution isn't what gets you up in the goddamn morning to be an elected official. It's the Bible that wakes you up in the morning, and the Constitution just gives you an excuse to do what you think the Bible wants you to do. And quite frankly, I don't want to hear that shit. I want to hear you get up in the goddamn morning thinking about what the laws of the United States of America require from you. I want to hear you get up in the goddamn morning thinking about what the citizens of the state of Texas need from you, particularly the citizens of the state of Texas who are the most vulnerable, because everybody else is probably going to be all right anyway. So really, I give a fuck for what are you doing for the most vulnerable Texans. Everything else is fucking bullshit. But you can't even talk to me about what you want to do for people unless you can ground it in your faith. And then the second thing you're telling me again is that you don't think people will receive your message and vote for you on the merits of your candidacy and what your candidacy can do for people unless, again, you ground it in your Christian identity. That is, again, definitionally Christian, liberal Christian nationalism. When people talk about liberal Christian nationalism, again, when people talk about liberal Christian nationalism, they are fundamentally not saying it's the same exact thing as ultra-right-wing Christian nationalism. What they are noticing is that as what is supposed to be the counterbalance to the Christo-fascism of the right, rather than offering a resistance rooted in our true democratic, constitutional, liberal, democratic ideals, they are rooting the resistance in a preferred manifestation of Christianity that also, by definition of needing power to take power away from the bad Christians, is itself then seeking to monopolize power from a place of Christian ethos. And this telling the rest of us we have to accept that and celebrate it, or else there's no hope for us to stop the really bad things from happening to us, which makes it inherently coercive. That's the problem. And this motherfucker doesn't even have to acknowledge the problem. He just gets to go, oh, you're talking about a liberal? You're calling a liberal a Christian nationalist? Well, then you hear he's a liberal? My work here is done. Nothing to see here.
Me about their attacks on Talarico is that they see the need to address his Christianity. When it comes to Joe Biden or Pete Buttigieg or Kamala Harris, they most...
Exactly, you see. Setting the ceiling on the floor and calling it success. Fucking perfect. Could have saved us 3 hours.
often ignore faith and go for tried and true labels like woke, radical, and extremist. With Talarico, he's a Christian nationalist too, just the wrong kind. Self-avowed Christian nationalists like Wolf and Engel aren't the only ones leveling the charge. In a recent article at The Atlantic, the Princeton historian and mainline Christian Heath Carter also categorizes Talarico as a Christian nationalist. Quote, Talarico's critique verges on irony. Given his own campaign for Senate, one presumes he is not opposed to the pursuit of power by avowed Christians. In a way that to me is lazy and strange, Carter suggests that, quote, dreams of a more Christian society are tantamount to Christian nationalism.
I do not know what just happened.
So, is James Talarico just a liberal Christian nationalist? First, we need to do something that Heath Carter never does in his article at The Atlantic, and that's define Christian nationalism.
Word.
Now, to me, the most prominent and culturally influential definition comes from the sociologists Andrew Whitehead and Samuel Perry in their book, Taking America Back for God. This is a sociological definition. It's the one that has been drawn upon and used and has been the inspiration for surveys by Pew and PRRI and others. This is a Christian nationalism that asks people, do you think that the United States government should declare this country a Christian nation? Should we teach the Bible in schools? One survey asks, do you think that God should have dominion over all of our country? Here's how they define it in the book. Christian nationalism is a cultural framework that blurs the distinctions between Christian identity and American identity, viewing the two as closely related and seeking to enhance and preserve their union. It is undergirded by identification with a conservative political orientation, Bible belief, premillennial visions of moral decay, and divine sanction for conquest. Finally, its conception of morality centers exclusively on fidelity to religion and fidelity to the nation.
And this is the problem of amateurism. The problem when you think you're just so smart and you understand how scholarship works and you've betrayed a painful ignorance of same. First off, you're already way out where you need to bring a lot more to this table when you're talking about the sociological definition. Because again, it's like you need to explain to me why I should prefer the sociological definition over other definitions. Because again, I just Googled Christian nationalism and I got the Wikipedia definition. Christian nationalism is a form of religious nationalism that focuses on promoting the Christian views of its followers in order to achieve prominence or dominance in political, cultural, and social life. And again, if we just go with religious nationalism, promoting Christian views to achieve prominence in politics, culture, and social life, boom. Now I just got a broader definition. And see how now from my broader definition, I can enter into a meaningful conversation about whether James Talarico represents Christian nationalism. So you have to understand that scholars may use particular definitions, especially when you write books, especially because when you write books about particular phenomena, you want to very narrowly define the subject matter of your book. The other thing is, even though this is a good definition of Christian nationalism, and I would argue authoritative in the sense that it's what most people, particularly most scholars, probably do mean when they say Christian nationalism, it's not a definition that is above critique, particularly sociological critique or anthropological critique. And a lot of the critique of this type of definition of Christian nationalism is that it is too narrow and that it is, in a sense, reactionary. It is in essence takes a very particular manifestation of Christian nationalism with what you might call a very extreme recency bias and makes Christian nationalism out to be, the sort of alt-right MAGA Christian nationalism, but does not really properly reflect even enough of what Christian nationalism would really have to be to even explain where that comes from. Right. It's almost like an ahistorical definition. It's a definition that says, well, look at them right now being baddies. Let's not talk about where that comes from. Let's not talk about the wider structures in society that manifested. Let's not talk about how the spectrum of mainstream Christian thought has constantly drifted in that direction. Let's not talk about how that has always been a thread in America. Let's not talk about that's always dominated history. Let's not talk about how that particular type of thread has always dominated and emerged victorious when it comes to the internal power structures of Christianity. Like there's so much that's wrong with that definition. And again, I don't even care, right? Because most of the time, we're reading a book like this, we would go like, okay, a person wants to talk about, Christian nationalism right now in America in the moment of the alt-right, MAGA fucking thing, like, oh, okay, cool, right? And then you go on and read the book and go on about your business. But if we were going to really talk about that as a fucking authoritative end-all be-all definition of Christian nationalism, no, absolutely the fuck not. No, absolutely the fuck not. We'd have to have a much bigger conversation about what a lot of issues are with that definition. And there's a lot of them. The fact that it's inherently calling it conservative, the fact that it's talking about particular types of Bible beliefs, the fact that the premillennial vision of moral decay, like you're getting into almost very specific theological and philosophical commitments. No, again, useful for this book, fine. Probably appropriate, sure. Is it what most scholars right now mean when we're, casually in conversation trying to refer to Christian nationalism or discuss Christian nationalism and what the Christian nationalists are doing? Yeah, fine. Again, but is it enough for you to now say, look, I pulled this definition from this very particular book, and now I can say you're a fucking goddamn idiot for suggesting that James Talarico's doing Christian nationalism because, look, it says right here in the book that I like that you got to be conservative to be a Christian nationalist. And then I just tell you he's not conservative, so he can't be a damn Christian nationalist. If he's not conservative, you've got to be conservative to be a Christian nationalist. And again, it's like, bro, like, that's cool. Like, I'm glad you read the book or whatever. But the fact that you now think other fucking human beings should follow your goddamn political analysis because you read a goddamn definition in a book shows that you really don't understand how sociology fucking works to the point that your ass should be authoritatively citing sociology. Like, this is just like, And I'm just saying, y'all, that's the problem of amateurism. And I don't like doing that because I know I have a PhD and shit like that. But it's not me trying to be an elitist. It's me trying to say expertise fucking matters. And when you're living in a very, very serious moment of society, it matters where people get their information from. And right now, we're not just living in a fucking time of, we're on the brink of / probably already in World War III. We're also living in a time where expertise has been undermined with the capitalist agenda of the mainstream media, such that we no longer trust mainstream news sources to be giving us actually objective and critical journalism. That has forced people into this social media, independent media ecosystem, which is fucking phenomenal because it means journalists and experts and scholars and people who are doing the most and knowing the most are sharing the most and giving the most, and we're getting the most. And that's definitely amazing, but it also means that's definitely not required. And there's also low barriers of entry. And then you combine low barriers of entry with people basically wanting to be told what they want to hear. And it's a problem that those critical voices are sort of drowning in a sea of, not always the greatest analysis. And I don't think this guy's like a total asshole. It doesn't seem like a fuckface or anything like that. But yeah, it's just like, bro, like, the author in the article that he's critiquing was like trying to like have a serious grown-up conversation. Like, yo, there's a moment right now that the world is in. Yo, there's a moment right now that this country's in. Yo, holy shit. There's a moment right now with what just happened in the Democratic primary for the Senate seat in Texas. And the person is trying to connect the dots for people and trying to say, like, yo, when the Christo-fascists are dropping bombs, claiming Donald Trump is like God's chosen person, like, maybe we need to be critical of how Christian we want our response and resistance to be, and the whole world is watching right now. If we're gonna reclaim our place as a stabilizing influence on the world and show that we are really capable of being grown in this moment and creating the type of, again, egalitarian type of modern democracy that the world wants to see, showing that we can do that. maybe having both sides of our country dominated and just soaked in the blood of Christ at every waking moment while we're dropping bombs and people claiming that that's God's anointed thing. Maybe that's not the best look right now. But we can't even now have that conversation because, again, the liberal defenders of the fucking liberal, neoliberal, fucking Christo-fascist status quo, here they come to tell us, don't you even dare fucking think about it. Don't you even dare think about calling out Christian nationalism on the left. Don't you even dare think about it or you're going to fuck everything up. And so they silence the critical adult conversation we need to have in this moment before it even starts. And that's the problem of amateurism. Fine, like I'm doing the same thing. I put a fucking camera up and rant on the internet. Everybody's got the right to do that. I'm just saying there are consequences when we stop listening to the motherfuckers who know what the fuck they're talking about.
So to me, there's three components to Christian nationalism in this definition that are really pertinent for answering our question about James Talarico. Number one, by merging identities, Christian nationalists maintain that one must be Christian to be truly American. So Christian nationalists are going to tell you that it's only if you're Christian are you really, truly, absolutely American. Now, we all know, and we've talked about it on this show for 1,000 episodes on this podcast, that more often than not, white Christians sneak in there somehow the idea that to be a white Christian is to be the real American.
But see, again, most Christians actually believe you can't be a good person without being a Christian. They believe Jesus is literally the only way to living a life worth redemption. So again, this bullshit, you know, it's if you follow this channel, it's very similar to how I talk about religious extremism. I don't like the way we talk about religious extremism because it allows us to say those Christians over there are the problem. It's the far right, ultra right wing, uber fundamentalist, evangelical, and it's like how many adjectives do I have to throw in there before I make sure my audience knows I'm not talking about them? How many lanes do I have to carve out before I've created enough fucking exit lanes that everybody's no longer the problem? So I don't like when people talk about extremism that way because, again, it allows you to say, oh, that motherfucker that calls for the 7 Mountains Mandate, that motherfucker says that Christianity needs to dominate family, government, arts, business, entertainment, education. That's a goddamn religious extremist over there. And then over here, what about this motherfucker that says you need to acknowledge him in all of your ways? You need to dedicate your life to Christ. You need to make sure that Christ is the center, that he is your hope, meaning, and purpose. Again, the 7 Mountains Mandate makes you a religious extremist. Dedicating every fucking waking thought to Jesus Christ makes you a goddamn heroic, patriotic American. Do you see that? That's the problem of painting religious extremism as always being the people over there. And now the same thing is happening with Christian nationalism. From my perspective, as somebody who doesn't want to live in a society dominated by Christianity, for real, the problem is the result. When the result is Christianity on the right, Christianity on the left, Christianity in the middle, the problem is there's nowhere to go to build a society where the rest of us get to have equal say. And then effectively, Christianity becomes a religious test for public office. James Talarico is actually signaling to people he's good with that. How does he signal that? He signals that by passing the religious test he was never even asked to take. Literally grounding his policies, his leadership, his civil service, his opposition to January 6th, all that shit to him is what Jesus would have him do. Rather than letting Jesus wake your ass up in the morning and then come into business and handling based on what the state of Texas would require you to do for what's best for the most marginalized and most vulnerable Texans. Now, am I happy that James Talarico seems more inclined to look out for the most vulnerable Texans than whoever his far right Christian nationalist opponent would be? Sure. But even as a non-Christian, I got a problem with the fact that it comes at the cost, again, of freezing out Jasmine Crockett, who, as far as I know, is probably also a Christian, who we all know based on her demonstrated record would have probably moved us even further in the right direction. So now we got to go back to having the conversation about why isn't her faith enough? Even though she already showed she can do the job without drenching everything in Christianese. So to me, again, we've moved in the wrong direction, where we've said the person who shows they can do it and doesn't need to use their faith, the person who demonstrates, proof positive, they can actually do the separation of church and state. We say, fuck that. We want the people who are going to lead based on their biblical commitments. So that's the whole game right there. So look, y'all, I'm going to actually call it because it's just more of the same from him and more of the same from me. I did update the description down there, so y'all can go watch the whole thing if you want to. I highly recommend it because it does actually get into, just some of the nuances of how this whole conversation is playing out. But I think if you keep in mind the things that I'm saying, you'll see that this is actually a very serious problem. Like, a lot of people know that like a lot of what we do around here is counter apologetics. So we're kind of not shy about the fact that we're, not a religious community. But if you notice, like, I spend as much, probably more time dealing with things more on the political and social side of the fence. And number one, that's just more important to me, more pressing, and also just further, that's what I have experience and expertise, and that's what my background makes me more prepared to do. I come from a politically involved family. I work still sometimes as a political strategist, and I've worked a lot on campaigns. And I've been a sociology professor. I'm an anthropologist. I'm a social scientist. Spent a lot of time as a community organizer. So this is the lane I'm comfortable in. And like I said, I think it's more pressing to make the connections, but between not just that I'm not religious, but why I think it's important that society moves in a secular direction. But with that being said, y'all, it's like we need national deconstruction. This country's a fucking cult. This is cult shit. It's cult shit when you have an apocalyptic branch of a motherfucking cult literally trying to seize power and actually bring about Armageddon for real. And you have to understand, like, we there's another ahistorical thing we do. And that is we tell ourselves that we've progressed in terms of civilization. And so now, part of what scares a lot of us as secular people is we think about biblical times and, people that lived thousands of years ago. And we go, man, the world was so barbaric. There was so much violence, so much barbarism. Things were so terrible. Things were so crazy, right? And then we're like, oh, we're so lucky that, people aren't as extreme as they were back in Bible times. And it's like, I got fucking news for you. We're just as extreme now. I think we're more extreme now than we were then. Number one, we have the same barbarism in us because we're still allowing the same barbaric ideologies to dominate our societies. We literally are still living in a society. First off, we don't evolve that quickly. So we basically still have Iron Age brains. And we live in an Iron Age brain society where instead of like catching the fuck up, society keeps getting indoctrinated in Iron Age ways of thinking. But on top of that, nobody in Bible times dropped bombs on grammar schools from a foreign country. There was no biblical nation, not even Babylon or whatever fucking evil empire you want to think of, the Romans Empire. None of the big bads of history had the motherfucking nukes. There's only one nation in the history of humanity that has ever used nuclear weapons, and it is the modern United States of America. And so now the modern United States of America and its nuclear ally, Israel, are saddling up for an apocalyptic showdown with AI, drones, and nukes. AI, drones, and nukes. That's on top of the fucking warships, tanks, planes, all the missiles, all the shit we've been having. All the shit we've been having. Now they got the Bible ain't got shit on what we are living through right the fuck now. Let me tell you, just because you and I happen to be safe at this moment, don't get it twisted. Don't get it twisted. We live in a far more savage, barbarian world than they did in Bible times. And they didn't know shit. They were extremists. Like, don't get me wrong, they was patriarchal and racist, and the slavery and the rape and the way they treat. I mean, they did not have anything approximating modern sensibilities. At least not, the people that are cited in, those cultural accounts. I'm sure there was motherfuckers around who had a little more sense and knew they were fucking crazy, but we won't talk about them too much. The secular rational people have always been around. God damn it, don't let them erase us from history. All right, but for real, like they didn't know shit about how to wash their hands or where thunderstorms come from or how planets are formed or any of the evolution. None of that shit, right? So we have a lot of this modern information and supercomputers in our hands, and you could literally Google any of this shit. But again, they also didn't have nukes. So you have to be more extreme to have that type of Iron Age thinking in an environment where that type of Iron Age thinking is clearly outdated, clearly outmoded, clearly insufficient, clearly not even in lockstep anymore with what the social sensibilities of the time are. So that's what I'm saying. Like literally, like even though those beliefs sound extreme to us, they were far more, representative of a socially acceptable outlook on life because of the relative depravity of information. Now, we have so much more information, but also so much more history. We're on the other side of so much history that has taught us, how barbaric and inhumane we can be. We've learned, we've learned from the Iron Age conflicts. We've learned from the world wars. We've learned from the Holocaust. We've learned from the dispossession of the natives. We've learned from settler colonialism. We've learned from the transatlantic slave trade. So we're supposed to have literally a more evolved sense of the common human dignity. But we're dropping them bombs on schools in ways that even our biblical ancestors would be like, the fuck is wrong with y'all? Right? So like really, we really have to take seriously the moment we live in. And these motherfuckers are trying to fight a holy war. And instead of this being our opportunity in 2026 to be like, yo, we're done with the Holy Wars thing. Sorry, we're done with Holy Wars. And I wish we could end Holy Wars without having to critique Christianity. But listen, why? Like, why do white liberals, why do white people? See, this is the shit that nobody wants to talk about. Christianity is the great white lie. It's the great white lie of society. And it is the great white lie upholding white privilege. And only white privilege explains why we won't literally just say it's 2026 and we're done with Holy Wars. Yeah, now we could say, but Jay, there are lots of black and brown people bombing each other. Sure. There are lots of black and brown people having religious conflicts and wars and decapitating each other because they don't like each other's religion. They're absolutely goddamn, you're absolutely goddamn right. But again, they don't have access to the fucking nukes. They are not dominating the world order in terms of military power, political power, social cultural power, economic power. Okay. And if the world said we were done with holy wars and we are no longer going to allow people to commit state crimes against humanity in the name of religion, and we're going to do that from a place of acknowledging that none of these religions can be proven to be true. And if you can't even substantiate the material reality of your faith claim, then you can no longer use your faith claim to do harm to other people. Doing that, though, would cause so much outrage and backlash and emotional fallout, and again, they wouldn't show up. Remember the threat? If you don't go with Talarico, if you don't go with the good Christians, then Christians aren't even going to vote. Christians aren't even going to be interested in society anymore. They're not even going to be interested in world peace. They're not even going to be, right? If there's no God, what's wrong with bombing girls' schools? If there is no God, what's wrong with the greater Israel? See, that's the logic. That's liberal Christian nationalism. So if we did that, do you really think anybody would say, but the poor black and brown people? But what about all of the indigenous African spiritual traditions we would lose, Jay? Jay, what about the Muslims in the Middle East? Right? Most of the power, most of the white liberal capitalist elite, they're perfectly happy to tell you Islam's sitting on some bullshit. They're perfectly happy to tell you Allah is not God. They don't believe in Allah. They don't believe none of that shit. They don't believe in the fucking pink, the blue-skinned angels the blue-skinned, people in Hinduism. They don't believe in that. They don't believe in the Buddha. So the white man's happy to tell everybody else in the world that their religion is bullshit. He's happy to tell everybody else in the world that their religion is a goddamn fairy tale. So that's what I mean when I say that it's the great white lie, because it's protecting the religious sensibilities of the people in power. It's not to say that religion and faith is not no, that's just part of the human condition. People have always had weird supernatural beliefs as long as there have been humans. I mean, some of us even think that that's literally part of what makes us human. Like, again, in real scholarship, y'all, I hate to tell y'all this, definitions get challenged. In real scholarship, we argue about what words mean, and we argue about what they should mean, and we argue about what they used to mean versus what they should mean going forward. So anyway, if you literally, one of the arguments that people have is what actually defines a human being, right? We can certainly do enough genetic testing and all the blase and the flavonoids now to say everybody alive is a modern human, right? But when in the record do we actually become Homo sapiens, or even the genus Homo, right? Or however, whatever level of the taxonomy you're looking at. And then what are the defining characteristics? Now, how does that relate to religious and spiritual beliefs? Some people argue that one of the defining characteristics of what makes us humans is behaviors like burying our dead. And it's believed that that has always been tied to some sort of supernatural practice, because it's always seemed to indicate, because when we see the history of people burying their dead, there's always some sort of preparation for life beyond, right? There's always, they're buried with the things that are important to them. They're buried with tools. They're buried with like things they're going to need in the next life or whatever, right? And so it sort of says, okay, well, actually, literally, maybe this type of, you know, supernatural thinking or whatever, you know, really predates, you know, our emergence fully as Homo sapiens. So in a sense, maybe that's always been with us to the point that, you know, like we're not even sure they're human until they're burying their dead, basically, right? So yes, you know, I don't get lost in the weeds of understanding how human it is to have beliefs. But at the same time, when I say we definitely live in a world where it's obviously also true that none of these belief systems have been substantiated. None of these faith systems can be observed, yet we still allow faith as a justification for so much conflict. Who does that serve? You have to ask yourself, why do the people in power still behave this way? And then if their safe operation relies on the consent of the governed, why do we, the governed, at least passively, consent to religious motivation still being used to drop bombs on people? And so then I ask myself the structural analysis. I look for the conflict. Who are the people in power? Who's not in power? How does maintaining a privilege of religion help the people in power and harm the people who are not in power? And then it just becomes very obvious. Yes, everybody's religious, but not everybody's in power. And so then you look for, how do the powerful use their religion? Oh, okay, well, who's the most able to use power on the world stage? And then who uses religion to do so? And you're looking at it play out right now. It's this unholy alliance between Christianity and Zionism. And then their sometimes actual also weird alliance with far right forces of Islam. And that's also playing out right now. Like even conservative Americans are all super anti-Islam, but also strangely comfortable with, you know, Israel, a greater Israel, and the fact that like American culture is now officially sponsored by Saudi Arabia. What's up with that? Right? So look, my point is this. It's just time to stop playing this dumbass game. It is just time to say enough is enough. And it's 2026. We want to live in reality, on reality's term. We want a very simple test for society. It requires one fucking question. Are they human? As soon as the answer is yes, we know they immediately qualify for every single human right, the full list. That is just the basics we're looking for in 2026. It's fucking 2026. Everybody should have human rights. Period. End of story. Period. End of story. And then we should have the basics of a modern, fucking well-established democracy. We should have universal healthcare. We should have free education. We should have universal basic income, housing as a human right, the basics. the basics. We're tired of having to live without the basics when they're right there. All we got to do is literally reach out and grab it. And this religious indoctrination and dogma continues to prohibit our progress. And every time we gather enough steam that we can actually make some moves, or every single time the world is so on fire, we literally have to make some moves. And every time we can meet the moment and finally push back and finally create that world that we're trying to live in, here come the liberal Christians and their defenders. Here comes the moderate. Here comes the apologist for the status quo, holding up all the space for the Christians, who then insist that we don't change too much too quickly. And once again, that is liberal Christian nationalism. All right, gang, I got to get out of here and go teach. I love y'all. I'm gonna try to be back later to maybe work on my my modeling a little bit. And I think me and Patty gonna hit y'all up this weekend. So y'all will see me soon. And